Olá, o Canaltech Entrevista de hoje é com Peter Coffey. Ele é o VP de Pesquisas Estratégicas da Salesforce. O trabalho dele é ir até as empresas, conversar com os executivos, com os CIOs, para entender o que eles precisam e, a partir daí, desenvolver novas técnicas, novas soluções que facilitem o trabalho e a vida deles. Peter, thanks for talking to us.
It's my great pleasure. I'm sorry I have no Portuguese and my Spanish is only good enough to make Portuguese very confusing to me. Yeah, obrigado. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, I was reading your bio, your backgrounds, like you worked on aerospace, defense sector, alternative fuel research, video game development, media. You're a journalist and blogger as well.
For 18 years.
Yeah, how does it help you nowadays on your job here at Salesforce? Because Salesforce works with so many kinds of industries as well, so this might help you.
As we have in the last 4 or 5 years dramatically increased our emphasis on being able to speak to every industry in its own language. For our first 8 years, we were sales tools being sold to salespeople. And there's a vocabulary of sales that crosses all industries. But if I'm going to talk about platform opportunities to someone in manufacturing, to someone in healthcare, to someone in higher education, to someone in high tech, there are quite different vocabularies involved in kinds of what kind of applications you need to deliver, what kind of audiences you need to serve, what kinds of scale you need to provide. And so I've been able to make contributions. I was our first CTO, Chief Technology Officer for our automotive practice. I've been able to serve as an executive sponsor for accounts in oil and gas, for airline transport and so on. We really want to go in and have a conversation with customers that is not really about IT anymore. Really, it's about what are the changes in your environment, the change in the behavior of your customers, your competitors, the environment around you. Those are the conversations that customers most value us coming in and having.
Mm-hmm. And also, we were talking before starting recording, you're telling me how was it like when you get into Salesforce, when you started working here?
Sure.
Cloud was a word that didn't exist on that contest, right?
It did
Cloud
not.
was the cloud.
When I joined the company, we used the phrase on demand. IBM called it utility computing. These were labels describing the product. The word cloud, if you look at things like Google Trends, you can plot the emergence of the phrase cloud computing. And it came along several months before any of the industry players began to use it to describe what we offered. Cloud computing was a model of the marketplace expressing its frustration with the kind of complexity that consumes money and talent and time, but doesn't create competitive advantage for the company. And so this is the conversation I had with Mark Benioff 11 years ago about what would a platform as a service have to do for you. It would have to do things like security, like high availability, like protection of data integrity, that are complicated and have tremendous downside risk if done even slightly imperfectly, but that if done perfectly are not noticed as competitive differentiators. And that is where I feel platform as a service is quite different from infrastructure as a service. If I buy virtual servers, security is still my job. Capacity planning is still my job. What we believe is the proposition of platform as a service is that it should take things like capacity and make them simply arise as needed, that it should take security and make world-class security a built-in feature with specific behaviors as simple literally as checking a box to say, yes, I want audit history on this. Yes, I want two-factor authentication on this. And you don't need to understand the mechanism. You only need to know what your model requires you to provide.
I read somewhere you saying that we can't look at the internet as the world's library anymore. We need to look at the internet as a world's supercomputer. So
Absolutely.
that's kind of you're doing, or Salesforce is doing nowadays,
Yes.
isn't it?
The tremendous breakthrough of the web was to make any fact known to any person available to anyone if that fact were made public in the first place, of course. And now increasingly it's to make any process or any computation available on demand, and to break this down into finer and finer structure. So not just a particular application that solves a particular problem, but a particular subroutine, a tiny little component of knowledge And now, of course, with our Lightning experience, we've made those components visible, and you can have them on any device you want. And you put it into an application once, and now it's on your phone, it's on your desk, it's on any other mobile device you choose. That componentization of expertise is the next logical step for what a global network should be providing to people.
Might be a really interesting moment to work on that as well, with all these wearable devices. Actually, Salesforce has a wearable division, right?
Yes.
How do you see those now? Those gadgets nowadays coming into the business, coming into the corporate side of the things?
The most important thing to realize is that because we made a few key decisions 16 years ago to be nothing but cloud, nothing but a multi-tenant architecture, nothing but a metadata-based configuration layer, the result of that is that as new devices came to market, we were the first business application that could be shown on the iPhone. We were the first business application that could be shown on the Apple Watch. Why is that? Because no new writing of code was necessary to deliver us there. It became a configuration question rather than a reprogramming question. And so the explosion now of varieties of device and one person going in moments from looking at the watch to transferring their attention to a larger screen on the phone to going to a laptop to collaborate with customers. This is a mobility of your attention and experience rather than a mobility of just the device. Making a device mobile, well, that's easy. Allowing the experience to move conveniently and in a fluid way from one device to the next, that requires a good architecture, and we have one of the best, arguably the only one of its kind.
So what are the main questions you hear from the CIOs and the guys that you speak with relating to the cloud, relating to the platform?
Sure.
What are the main things you...
Mainly, we don't get very many questions relating to the cloud anymore because the cloud is no longer controversial. There's been a dramatic pivot in the nature of the conversation around the suitability of the cloud model and the acceptability of cloud services in different regions and in different industries. In emerging markets, the ability to implement at scale without large initial capital investment makes the cloud tremendously appealing, where you have new industries that want to emerge and become global brands very quickly. If you look at the most widely discussed breaches of data for major global brands over the last few years, they have one thing in common. Every single one involved owned on-premise infrastructure. There have been no successful attacks directly against a major cloud. There have not. And Verizon does their annual survey of data breaches, and one of their comments is, the only way you will ever crack a cloud is by cracking the corporate network and then going from there out into the cloud using privileges that you stole with social engineering methods. If I can steal your password, I can steal the data, and that has nothing to do with where it is. But we, on the other hand, are able to provide mechanisms. For example, I can detect that you are logging in from a device you've never used before. I can re-authenticate you through your email. I can detect that you are logging in after work hours. Well, your profile says you're not supposed to be doing that. I can detect that you're logging in from a network address that's not in your office, and your particular privilege profile says you're only supposed to be logging in from work. Now, these are straightforward for us to do at immense scale. Most smaller companies probably won't bother, because security is our business. Trust is our number one value. And in most other organizations, it's kind of a collateral matter. And so as that recognition becomes more widespread, we're finding that major financial services, public health and safety, higher education, the most sensitive domains of data storage and use in the world, increasingly they're saying, you know, not using cloud is beginning to look like the high-risk, doing it as inexpensively as possible model. Cloud is no longer seen as the cheap easy but risky way. Now cloud is seen as the reliable, straightforward, provably safe way.
Okay, the other question I was asking you is like, we're talking about that the motto in our world is disrupt or be disrupted,
Yes.
but how to cope with all these changes, how to follow all the things that are going on now. I mean, you work on the industry, you talk to the big guys, you talk to the people that are making these changes, but the guy on the company, how do they change, how can they follow and understand what's happening?
You'll never go wrong by spending time with a customer and not merely asking them what they want, but observing them and realizing what they need that it's never even occurred to them you could do for them. That's a radical idea. Many companies are strongly invested in the idea that what they know how to do is important, and doing those things better must be the right thing to do. It is interesting to see how often when you go to the field and watch the behavior of your customer, there may be things that you've gone to great difficulty to provide that your customer rarely uses at all, and things that you never considered to be part of what you should be doing that your customer is finding someone else to do. Well, if the customer using your product is having to go look up information to use your product, why wasn't the product delivering that information in the moment of use? If your customer ever has to go consult instructions on how to do it, well, why wasn't the product itself doing a better job of guiding the use? There is so much opportunity for products to become not merely better, faster, cheaper ways of frustrating the customer, but instead to become more intelligent and adaptive ways of understanding and solving the customer's problem.
All right. Okay, Peter, thank you very much for talking to us. It was really great.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.